today we're going to be talking about the second set of oligopoly models. So in the last lecture, we looked at the case where the firm sets quantity and then lets the market sort of figure out the price. They have a pretty good idea what the price is going to be, but the key point is that they were choosing quantities. And we looked at two models. We looked at the Cournot model, where the firms choose their quantities simultaneously. And we looked at the Stackelberg model, where we have a leader that announces how much it's producing first, and then the follower observes it and decides how much it wants to produce. Okay, today, we're going to look at a somewhat different set of questions. Rather than choosing quantities, firms are going to choose prices in an oligopoly market. Okay, so they're going to choose a price, and then they're going to sell whatever quantity is demanded at that price. Okay, so the outline is we're going to go over price-setting oligopoly models. We're going to look at the classic Bertrand model, where firms set prices and produce identical products. So consumers don't have any preference for one firm's products over the other. They view them as identical. And in that case, they're simply going to buy whichever product has a lower price. And then we're going to look at the case of differentiated products, where the products are a little bit different. They're different in some features, and some consumers might, all else equal, have a slight preference for one of the firm's products rather than the other. Before we go over the models, my question for you is, which do you think applies to video games distributed via DVDs or some sort of physical cartridge? A, firms decide how much to produce, then price is determined by the market. Or firms set price and then it sells as many as consumers demand at that price. At least long ago in the past, what I think clearly applied was that they decided how many to produce, right? They actually had to literally produce those physical cartridges. Think back to like the old Nintendo games or something like that. And it was hard to sort of produce another one instantaneously. So now I have a related question. Which do you think applies more to software that's distributed by download? It's the same two potential answers. When I think of downloads, I think that they can be distributed very easily. So if there's a sudden increase in demand or there's more demand than the firm anticipated at a given price, it can meet that demand very quickly, right? It's just sending the information over the internet. And so I think in that case, it really would seem like the firm sets a price and then sells however many are demanded at that price. So then the question is, does this make a difference? At least based on the typical theoretical assumptions, the answer would be that it does in fact impact the prices that you pay. I want to first go over the model where products are identical. There are two firms in the market, and we'll see what happens when they set prices and sell however much is demanded at the price. That set of assumptions is known as the classic Bertrand duopoly model. And additionally, to make the explanation a little bit simpler, even though this isn't required, I'm going to assume that the costs are zero. Right? So fixed costs are zero, and marginal costs, they're equal to some number, but it doesn't depend on how many are produced. So the basic idea here is that if one firm undercuts the other firm by even a fraction of a penny, like 1/10,000th of a penny, and we assume consumers are perfectly informed, then every single consumer will buy from the firm that offered the lower price. And let's just say, for sake of argument, that if they both set the same price, they'll split demand. Okay, so let's think about what happens if one firm charges a higher price than the other firm. Let's assume that one firm charges a price of $10, the other of $9, and we'll say marginal cost is $5. The firm that's charging a higher price will not sell any. People view the products as identical. Everyone knows which one has the lowest price, and so we assume they will all buy from the firm which is charging $9 rather than the firm which is charging $10. Okay? So let's think about what that implies for the incentives of the firm charging the higher price. Right now, they're earning zero profits because they're not selling any. If they were to, let's say, lower the price to just below $9, just below the other firm's price, it could be the tiniest amount below the other firm's price, 1/1000th of a penny, then they would go from having no profits to stealing all the sales. And they would then earn some positive profit. So clearly they'd want to do that. Well, then the other firm which has just lost all of its sales at charging a price of $9 now that the other firm has undercut it, the firm that now has a higher price would again want to undercut its rival. And sort of one firm would undercut the other, and so on, keep on undercutting each other. They have incentive to do so. Okay, we could also think about what would happen if they ever ended up setting the same price. Well, now they're splitting sales at some price. If they undercut the other firm by even the tiniest amount, by like the fraction of a penny, then they could go from having half the sales to all the sales at just the tiniest bit of a lower price. And so for most cases, they would have an incentive to do so. Okay, so these firms are like undercutting each other. They're undercutting each other. When does that stop? When do firms no longer have an incentive to undercut each other? Well, I think the answer is when price is equal to marginal cost. As long as price is above marginal cost, if they undercut their rival, they steal some sales, even though they're undercutting their rival by the tiniest price difference, 1/1000th of a penny, 1/10000000th of a penny, they can steal all the sales. Okay, so they always have an incentive to undercut the rival as long as the price is above marginal cost. But when price is at marginal cost, if they undercut the rival, they'd steal all the sales, but then they'd be losing money on every transaction because the price that they're charging is below the marginal cost, is below the cost it takes them to actually produce that item. Okay, so in that case, they would no longer have an incentive to undercut each other. Okay, so what does this imply? It implies that even if there's only two firms and there's barriers to entry and all that other stuff, that if firms set prices and the products are identical and everyone buys from the firm with the lower price, you'll still get the case that price is equal to marginal cost. Okay, so let's return to that graph that we were looking at earlier. So, before we'd shown that if you had a monopoly market, it's fairly high price, relatively low quantity. If you had a duopoly market and they competed on quantities, either the Cournot case or the Stackelberg case, price is a little bit lower, quantity is a little bit higher. You're reducing the size of that deadweight loss triangle, prices coming down, so consumers are a little better off, but still there's a substantial amount of market power. With this Bertrand model, with identical products, we get price equal to marginal cost, you get the same outcome as you would get under a perfectly competitive market. That is, you get a very high quantity of output and price equal to marginal cost. So actually think about it from a regulator's standpoint, right? It's actually having a duopoly is not bad at all. It yields the same outcome for consumers as a perfectly competitive market. Okay? Whereas if firms are competing on quantities, you get higher prices. So whether allowing three firms to sort of allow two of them to merge to become a market with two firms, whether that is okay from a regulator's standpoint depends on which set of assumptions is right. If firms are setting quantities and then letting the market determine the price, then the regulator probably doesn't want to do that. But if firms are setting prices and selling however much is desired at that price, and if you assume the products are identical, then it would suggest that you would get a good outcome, price equal to marginal cost, consumers are not harmed, etc.